Hey guys! Tonight we're heading deep into the dense buzzing jungles of Central Africa, where the mist clings to the trees like silk, and the earth smells of clay and tension. The air is thick, and somewhere in the distance a lion growls low enough to rattle your ribcage. You're standing outside a thatched palace, the scent of palm wine and blood mingling in the wind. And inside, a baby is being born. Not just any baby, a girl destined to throw emperors off balance, outwit entire armies, and leave Portuguese governors muttering her name like a curse. She'll rule, but not the way you expect. She'll take thrones by force, whisper over battle maps lit by oil lamps, and walk into churches barefoot while holding the reins of a kingdom. She'll live long enough to see enemies come and go, but you probably won't survive even 5 minutes in her world. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The birth of Njinga of Angola doesn't come quietly. It's the late 1500s in the Kingdom of Ndongo, modern-day Angola, and the drums are echoing through the bush. Her mother, one of the king's concubines, groans through a difficult labor. The legend says she's born with her umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, nearly strangled at birth. In Kimbundu, belief that's no curse, it's a sign she's destined for greatness, though maybe not peace. A spirit child, a restless soul. Dangerous, yes, but necessary. Her father is Angola Kilwanji, Kia Samba, King of Ndongo. A sharp mind who sees early what's happening on the coasts. The Portuguese aren't just merchants anymore. They've brought priests, gun sugar, and ships that leave full of slaves. They say they come in peace, but every treaty has a trapdoor. Kilwanji knows this, and Njinga watches him closely as he plays his political chess. You're a child in her sandals. Small, sharp-eyed, never quite silent. You learn to listen before speaking to notice the twitch of a commander's lip before he gives a foolish order. You're not the heir, but you're the one with the ear pressed to the door. You follow warriors into the bush. You ask too many questions. You're often sent away, but rarely far enough to stop listening. Historians still argue whether Njinga was formally educated by missionaries or whether she picked up her linguistic agility through court espionage. Either way, by her teens, she speaks Portuguese like a diplomat, Kimbundu like a poet, and swordplay like a seasoned officer. Not bad for a girl forbidden from the war council. Your brothers scoff. Your sisters sigh. You hold your tongue, but only because you're saving your breath for something important. The court is a whirl of power, flattery, and fear. The Portuguese want slaves. The Mbangala want war. The royal advisors want gold. And the people, they want someone who won't sell their cousins for silver trinkets. Njinga sees the rot early and begins cataloging every name, every betrayal, every weak spot in the palace walls. At night, you sneak into the armory. You touch the hilts of ceremonial swords. You try them when no one's looking. In the morning, your hands are blistered, but your smile is sharper than ever. Fringe rumors suggest Njinga practiced not just martial arts, but spirit rituals with her mother's kin, calling ancestors, invoking protection, burning herbs that made your dreams feel like prophecy. It's the kind of belief that turns strategy into something deeper, something terrifying. Not just a queen in training, but a vessel for vengeance. Outside the palace, the land is changing. Portuguese settlements grow on the coast. They carve out Luanda. They trade tobacco and brandy for captives. What used to be border skirmishes are turning into full-on campaigns. Raids, counter-raids, and always the Portuguese demanding more bodies for Brazil's sugar fields. Njinga, barely past girlhood, stands at the edge of the war table and watches the pieces move. She's not invited to speak yet, but she's memorizing every move. A cousin returns from a coastal battle, arms missing, eyes haunted. He mutters that the Portuguese use priests as spies, that crosses and chains go hand in hand. Njinga listens. She's beginning to suspect the church's promises of salvation come with terms and conditions. Very bloody ones. By age 15, she's already wielding authority behind the scenes, quietly advising, calming tensions between rival chiefs, reading letters in Portuguese and translating them a little more strategically than she admits. Mainstream historians agree that she was already a vital player in her father's court by the time she turned 20. What they debate is just how much power she truly held. Was she pulling strings or sharpening the scissors? At one feast, a noble laughs at her suggestion to negotiate directly with the Portuguese. He spills palm wine across the map, mocking her ideas. She doesn't respond. But a week later, his canoe mysteriously sinks in the Kwanzaa River. Coincidence maybe. Njinga never admits anything. She just smiles. That's the thing about her. She's always listening, watching, waiting for the moment when the world underestimates her. You're not a warrior yet, but you've already learned the most dangerous weapon isn't a blade. It's patience. And the jungle breathes around you thick, alive, watching. Like it already knows the blood that will be spilled here before this story ends. You wake to the sound of spear shafts thudding into dirt and the low chant of warriors beginning their morning rituals. Outside your royal quarters, the village is alive with energy, but something in the air has shifted. It's not celebration, it's caution. The kind of tension that coils itself behind the ribs and waits for the sound of horses or worse, foreign boots. You are Njinga now, no longer a curious child, but a young woman moving in the shadow of your father's crown. Ngola Kiluanji. Your father is no fool. He knows the Portuguese are not just another tribe to outmaneuver. They have cannons now, forts, gold, and worst of all, maps. They are drawing lines on your land, claiming rivers as newly discovered and towns as strategic assets. You understand what's at stake. You don't need to be heir to understand that the Kingdom of Ndongo is being boxed in like an animal. You ride with your father now. Not as a warrior, not yet, but as a pair of ears. He lets you sit in on meetings with local sobas, the minor chiefs. You watch them squirm, caught between fear of the Portuguese and loyalty to your father. You know who will bend and who will break. Your father reads war reports. You read people. Historians still argue whether your father had any intention of letting a woman succeed him. Most agree that in traditional Mbundu society, power was flexible. It could move through sisters, mothers, aunts. Others insist the old ways were already shifting under colonial pressure, pressing women out of the way. You don't care, because whether the men like it or not, you've already started your own campaign. Your younger brother Mbandi is heir apparent. Spoiled. Cunning in a lizard's way. He's not a fool either, and he sees your growing influence. He watches how your father asks for your thoughts in private, how generals lower their voices when you enter the room. You can feel Mbandi's eyes on you, like smoke, bitter, acrid, inevitable. One afternoon, as you study maps of the Kwanzaa River Basin, your father tells you, "If I could carve the crown into a knife and hand it to you, I would." You say nothing. You just keep tracing the river with your finger, wondering how many Portuguese ships now glide along it filled with chained men and sugar-bound barrels. You take your first real trip to Luanda not long after. It's supposed to be ceremonial, a goodwill visit, an exchange of gifts. You bring ivory, spices, your best robes. The Portuguese greet you with stiff smiles and too many prayers. They smell like metal and sweat and wax. You don't like it here. The city is a fortress in disguise. Behind every chapel is a prison. Behind every peaceful priest is a mercenary. Still, you sit at the governor's table, drink their thick wine, and speak fluent Portuguese. They are visibly unsettled. That night, you wander the outskirts of the city with a disguised guard. You see where the captives are kept. Not just prisoners of war, whole families taken inland and marched like cattle. One child stares at you through wooden bars with the expression of someone who's already said goodbye to everything. You return home different. Not just angry, strategic. You don't weep. You begin writing letters. You collect stories. You begin questioning the priests who visit court, asking for clarity on divine rights and royal legitimacy. That's when the name Njinga begins to echo louder than your title. It isn't just a birth name anymore. It's a signal, a shiver, a whisper on the wind that says this one isn't like the others. A fringe tale told by later oral historians says that one night you stood by the fire pit and asked your mother if the ancestors could see what was happening to the land. Your mother said, "They see everything, but they're waiting to see what you will do about it." You start gathering women, not formally, not yet, but you begin training a small cadre handmaidens who learn to wield knives beneath their robes, who carry hidden messages between provinces, who know how to brew herbs that can either heal a wound or silence a noisy advisor. The court continues to treat you like an ornament. But more and more often, those who underestimate you disappear. By now, Mbandi is growing nervous. He has the heir's title, but not the people's trust. You, on the other hand, are beginning to appear in prayers. Old women mutter your name for protection. Young warriors glance at you before charging into drills. One day, you come across a Portuguese emissary screaming at a local village chief. He demands tribute. The chief refuses. The man raises his whip, and before he can strike, your hand catches his wrist. He's stunned. You stare at him in silence, just long enough for him to realize he has no idea who you are, but he's already in trouble. Your father's health begins to decline not long after. You're now 20-something and sharper than ever. But the court grows colder. Advisors begin choosing sides. The Portuguese send more gifts than usual. They smell blood in the air, and not just your father's. One quiet night, your father calls you in. No one else is present. The land will betray you, he says, but only if you betray yourself first. You hold his hand as he drifts into unconsciousness. His grip never weakens, not even once. The mat is rolled out. You don't sit. You kneel. Because tonight is not about comfort. It's about the ritual. The old ways. Blood rites passed down through centuries of queens and warriors of chiefs who could speak to rain and hear answers in the rustle of trees. The Kingdom of Ndongo is changing, yes. But here, in the royal hut, thick with smoke and herbs, tradition still reigns. You are Njinga, and you're about to earn your name. The elders chant. The women circle you with painted gourds that rattle like bones, your bare-armed face streaked with ash, and in your lap sits a single short blade. Your father is still alive, but his grip on the throne is slipping. He's asked the council to formally recognize your strategic genius with a name that will echo through the highlands. But that name must be proven. At the center of the hut lies a woven mat soaked with the blood of a freshly slaughtered goat. The scent is metallic and hot. The sacrifice is meant to bind you to the spirits of war, those ancestors who never rested in peace because their battles were never finished. They wait in limbo, and tonight they will recognize you as one of their own. Your task is simple: step barefoot onto the mat. Let the blood soak into your skin. And don't flinch. Mainstream historians often skip this part, brushing over it as folklore or ceremonial flair. But local accounts insist that Njinga's name, derived from the verb kujinga, meaning to twist or wriggle, was tied to the way she was born, struggling through her own cord. And this ritual, it was her rebirth. You step forward, one foot, then the other. The goat's blood is warm and slippery beneath your soles. You grip the knife tighter. Suddenly, a warrior masked and silent lunges from the shadows. You've been warned this might happen. The spirits must see you react, must know you're ready to defend yourself. No guards. Help. No one flinches. This is your trial. You twist, drop low, and sweep your leg. He stumbles. You press the blade against his throat. You don't cut. You don't need to. The spirits are watching, and they nod. The women ululate. The warriors chant your name. Njinga, Njinga, Njinga. You've passed. That night, your father calls a private council. He names you royal envoy, an honor never before given to a woman. You will speak on behalf of the court, negotiate treaties, and ride into tense meetings armed with wit and steel. Your brother Mbandi is furious. He throws a goblet against the wall. The red wine dripping down the stone looks just like the goat's blood on your feet. Let her have her titles, he sneers. A name won't protect her from war. He's right, but you already knew that. Over the next year, you begin attending diplomatic functions as your father's right hand. You sit across from Portuguese governors with powdered wigs and priestly smiles. They expect a passive princess. They get a woman who quotes scripture better than their own friars and who remembers precisely what they said 6 months ago during a rainstorm in Luanda. Fringe accounts say you once corrected a Jesuit on his Latin mid-sermon. You told him that even God wouldn't sign the contract he was proposing. The elders laugh quietly when they speak of it. You grow bolder. Your guards wear red feathers, now a color once reserved only for kings. Your robes bear patterns no woman dared to wear. You don't ask permission anymore. You offer it. At one meeting, a Portuguese officer refuses to provide you a chair, says it would be unseemly for a woman to sit as equal among men. You don't flinch. You call your servant forward. He drops to his hands and knees, and you sit on his back with royal poise, eyes level with the governor's. That story spreads like fire through the highlands. It crosses rivers, reaches Luanda in a week. The Portuguese are stunned not just by the symbolism, but by the message: Njinga bows to no one. Historians still argue whether the man was a servant or one of your own advisors. Some claim he volunteered. Others say he was a former Portuguese soldier given the honor as a symbol of your dominance over colonial power. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. You begin receiving private letters from priests, some filled with flattery, others with warnings. Rome has noticed you. They are intrigued and slightly afraid. But while you shine in diplomacy, tensions at home begin to simmer. Mbandi is gathering allies, whispering about succession, telling Sobas that you're bewitched unnatural cursed with too much ambition. He accuses you of working with the Portuguese, of sleeping with their priests, of plotting against your own father. You ignore him until you can't. One morning you wake to find one of your closest handmaidens missing. By nightfall, her body is found in the river. No wounds, just weighted down with stones. You don't cry. You send no messengers. You simply walk into Mbandi's quarters unannounced and place her necklace on his table. He doesn't speak, doesn't blink. You turn and leave. He doesn't sleep well for weeks after that. Your father's health finally breaks during the wet season. The palace grows quiet. Rain drums on the thatch like a funeral dirge. You're not called to his bedside, but you go anyway. He's barely breathing. You take his hand. He opens his eyes, once looks at you, and mouths something. You never tell anyone what it was. When he dies, the kingdom grieves. But behind the tears, war drums are already beating. The throne is empty, and every eye is turning toward the mat again. The crown doesn't sit quietly. It trembles on its pedestal, a jagged thing made of power and suspicion. You don't wear it yet, but it's looking at you, testing you. And so is Mbandi. Your father's funeral is a blur of incense and muttered prayers, the chants of spirit keepers, mixing with the Latin murmurs of Jesuits. You walk through the courtyard, head-high robes, soaked from the rain, each step a declaration you're still here, still watching. But in the shadows, your brother moves. Mbandi wastes no time. Within a day of your father's death, he proclaims himself king. No ceremony, no council vote, no spiritual validation, just raw, unfiltered entitlement. And somehow the court lets him, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of exhaustion, perhaps because no one wants to be the one to tell a grieving kingdom that their next ruler is a snake in fine cloth. He doesn't exile you, not officially. That would look weak. Instead, he strips you of your titles. Your guards vanish overnight. The red feathers are banned. The women who trained beside you are reassigned to distant provinces. You're not banished, but you're no longer safe. So you disappear, not in body, but in presence. You stop appearing at court. You send no letters. You let Mbandi believe he's won. And in the meantime, you train. Historians still argue what exactly you did during this period of quiet retreat. Some say you studied Portuguese warfare tactics. Others claim you lived with spirit mediums in the eastern provinces, honing your command over ancestral rituals. Fringe accounts even suggest you entered the forest alone for 30 days, re-emerging with a panther tooth necklace and eyes that no longer blinked during battle. Whatever the truth, you return, different. You move with the calm of someone who's already decided what needs to be done. And soon, that moment arrives. Portugal, irritated with Mbandi's erratic behavior, offers a peace summit. A treaty discussion. They want someone intelligent, someone who can actually negotiate. And they remember you. It's almost amusing how quickly Mbandi sends for you. You receive his messenger while sharpening a spearhead. You smile, just a little. Of course, you say, I would be honored to serve my king. You return to the capital not in disgrace, but in silent command. Even your silence feels rehearsed, calculated, like a hunter walking into a den of wolves with blood already under her nails. The summit is held in Luanda. You travel under heavy escort, but your mind is light-focused. You know the stakes. Portugal wants slaves, land, trade routes, and they think a female envoy is more pliable, less dangerous. They're in for a surprise. You arrive in fine robes but wear no jewels. Your hair is braided tightly, your posture stiller than stone. When you step into the governor's chamber, the officials freeze. A chair is brought. It's lower than theirs. You wait. A servant offers another stool. You ignore him. Then, without a word, one of your retainers kneels behind you. You sit on his back, spine straight, eyes level, with the governor. The room goes silent. Mainstream historians confirm this moment. It appears in multiple Portuguese accounts, often delivered with visible discomfort. A black woman sitting proudly on the back of a man in front of white colonists. It wasn't just rebellion. It was artistry. You begin negotiations. You thank the governor for his hospitality. You compliment the craftsmanship of his weapons. You ask about his family. Then, you slide a scroll across the table, an agreement you drafted yourself. It's harsh, deliberate, not so much a peace treaty as a mirror held up to their own hypocrisy. You will offer prisoners, but not your people. You will allow trade, but only under Ndongo law. You will return escaped slaves, but only if they've committed crimes in your kingdom. And finally, you request baptism. This stuns them. You tell them you wish to become a Christian, that your people are ready to accept the one true faith, that you, Njinga, daughter of a warrior king, wish to be reborn as Ana de Souza. They love this. They throw a ceremony. A bishop dips water across your forehead. They give you a Portuguese godmother. You kneel, smile, and whisper prayers with convincing reverence. Historians still debate whether you truly converted. Some insist it was genuine. Others see it as calculated brilliance, a tactical maneuver to gain legitimacy in European eyes. Your personal letters remain ambiguous. You never quite explain. That's the point. But while you charm the Portuguese, Mbandi panics. He realizes too late that your presence has stolen the spotlight, that your name appears in their reports more than his, that some Portuguese even believe you are the true ruler of Ndongo. He recalls you, in haste, ends negotiations, blames you for being too accommodating, then too aggressive, then too female. And once again, you vanish. This time into exile. But you're not alone. Your loyal guards follow. So do the women you trained. So do a few chiefs quietly at first. Enough to form a shadow court, a whisper kingdom. You move east along the Kwanza River. You build a camp near the water's edge. You fish. You pray. You train. You wait. And then Mbandi stumbles. He executes a rival chief who held a vital trade route. He levies new taxes on the villages. He begins raving at night. Some say the spirits of those he betrayed come to him in dreams. Finally, he does what you predicted. He kills himself, or is assassinated, or poisoned. Historians still argue which. You don't weep, you don't dance. You simply gather your followers and march, not into Luanda, not into the palace, but into history under a rising moon, your footprints forming the path of a queen, not crowned, but earned. The smoke from Mbandi's funeral barely clears before the whispers start. She's coming back. She was always meant to. Njinga walks with the dead but rules the living. You don't rush. That would be too obvious. You arrive in increments like a shifting season. A war drum in the distance. A banner over a quiet village. A sermon redirected toward your virtues. One by one, the Sobas, the local chiefs, begin pledging fealty. Not loudly. Not yet. But clearly enough that even the Portuguese in Luanda start watching the horizon. And then you make your move. Mbandi left no male heir strong enough to hold the throne. No son that dared wear the crown. There are nephews, cousins, some of them ambitious, all of them nervous. But none have your mind, your army, your myth. You gather the council. They try to delay. They suggest a regency. They say this is delicate, that a woman, even one as formidable as you, will stir too many conflicts, foreign and domestic. You smile, gently, patiently. Then you summon your private guard. 12 women step forward, muscled, armed, silent. Their armor gleams in the morning sun. Their spears thud into the dirt in perfect rhythm. One by one, the counselors fall silent. And so, Njinga becomes queen. But not in the way your father did, not draped in robes and carried in ceremony. You ride into the capital on horseback, sword at your hip, hair braided back like a general. You walk into the palace, not to be crowned, but to claim what was already yours. Historians agree this was one of the most striking transitions of power in Angolan history. Some call it a coup. Others, a restoration. Fringe stories claim you recited your father's final words aloud as you sat on the throne, although no one dares repeat what they were. The court is tense. You don't purge it immediately. That would be predictable. Instead, you begin replacing advisors one by one strategically. You elevate women to positions long held by men. You assign new territory to loyalists. You open diplomatic channels, but only with those who treated you with respect during your exile. You let the Portuguese wait. They write letters. They send emissaries. You decline meetings. You say you're busy attending to internal matters. And you are. But not the ones they think. You're restructuring everything. You standardize tribute systems. You fix roads. You install spies. You place guards near grain stores. You redraw maps based on new intelligence from the river traders. You don't just want to survive this kingdom, you want to own it in every sense of the word. And you do something else. You start dressing differently. Not always, but often enough to send a message. You adopt male garments, tunics, armor boots. You carry weapons not as accessories, but as extensions of your hands. And you refer to yourself as king. This rattles the court. Historians still argue why you did it. Some say it was symbolic and assertion of authority in a man's world. Others believe it was more spiritual, that you believed the role of monarch was genderless, or perhaps required gender fluidity to channel ancestral power. Whatever the case, you do it deliberately. And you never explain it. Let them guess. Portuguese governors begin to panic. They try to install rival claimants. Nephews, cousins, men with thin bloodlines and thinner spines. They crown one such puppet in the coastal region and flood him with gifts, muskets, sugar, and hollow promises of support. You send him a message. Not written. Not verbal. Just a bundle. Inside is the head of his lead general wrapped in silk and a single red feather. You don't hear from him again. The Portuguese retaliate. They raid border villages. They torch crops. They try to incite rebellion among the Sobas. But you're faster, smarter. You meet them with ambushes, sabotage, and fire of your own. You begin sending messages not just to them, but to other African kingdoms. You propose alliances, shared intelligence, mutual trade pacts. You understand what too many fail to see, that the Portuguese aren't here for peace, and they're not going to leave on their own. Fringe accounts say you began keeping a personal journal at this time, written in a hybrid of Portuguese and Kimbundu, filled with coded entries about your dreams, visions, and planned campaigns. If it ever existed, it's long lost, but your strategy is clear. You make yourself indispensable. You offer safe passage to traders under your law. You protect villages if they swear loyalty. You allow missionaries to preach, but only under your supervision. You welcome commerce, but not conquest. You become what your father dreamed of and your brother failed to be. And still the rumors swirl, that you commune with spirits, that you never sleep, only rest with one eye open, that you drink a tea that lets you see through stone walls. You don't confirm any of it, but you don't deny it either. Let them wonder. At court, you institute new rituals. You hold war councils at dawn while the mist still curls over the river. You listen more than you speak. When you do speak, it's often in metaphor, in parable, in memory. Remember the chair, you might ask, and every soldier there remembers the time you sat on a man's back and made the Portuguese look down. You've made history already, and you're just getting started. The Portuguese want to talk. Again. This time, they're not sending a swaggering emissary with polished boots and a basket of lukewarm trade offers. They're sending a letter, formal, sealed with wax, addressed not to the regent of Ndongo or Her Grace of Matamba, but to Reina Njinga, Queen Njinga. They're starting to understand. You don't respond immediately. Instead, you spend 3 days riding through nearby villages, speaking with Sobas, eating roasted cassava by communal fires, listening to drums that tell you more than letters ever could. When you return to the palace, your reply is short. You will meet, but on your terms. They agree. Desperation makes cowards flexible. You select the location, neutral land by the river, far from Luanda's poisoned promises, and equally far from your capital. A wide open clearing, nothing but grass and wind and judgment. You bring a modest entourage. No brass bands, no parades. Just your royal guard, your sister Kifunji, and a translator you trust like a second heartbeat. The Portuguese arrive in style. Horses, cannon, escorts, priests, and too many ruffles. But they're not smiling like last time. They've heard what you did to their puppet king, and to their outposts, and to the general who thought you'd run from battle. You don't run. You negotiate. They open with demands. Always demands. They want peace, yes, but only if it comes with tribute. They want trade, but with them setting the prices. They want you to release escaped slaves who found refuge in your territories. And they want you to move your army away from their forts. You listen. You nod. And then you lean forward, eyes steady, and ask, "And what do you offer?" They flinch. Because they forgot. That's how diplomacy works. That you aren't here to beg for mercy. You're here to leverage it. Historians record that this negotiation ended in a stalemate. Some say it was productive, others say tense. The truth lies in what happened after how Portuguese raids slowed. How their reports began to include phrases like, Her Majesty Queen Njinga exhibits unusual mastery of strategy. You return home, not with a treaty, but with time. Time to solidify power. Time to plan. Time to prepare. Because you know what's coming next. They'll try again. They always do. And so you fortify. Not just your cities, but your narrative. You commission a scribe to begin writing your history, carefully curated tales of your rise, your victories, your baptism, your wisdom. It's part myth, part memoir, all weapon. You send copies to key Portuguese allies, to the Vatican, to rival kings. Your story becomes your shield. But at night you worry. Not about soldiers or spies, but about blood. Family blood. Your sister Kifunji, once a silent ally, has grown bitter. She claims you've gone too far dressing as a man, rewriting traditions, taking power meant for others. She whispers to the court that she should have been regent, that your authority is a spell, not a right. You don't retaliate. Not at first. You summon her to your chambers. You share roasted meat and sweet beer. You reminisce about the river near your childhood home, the way your father used to sing at dusk. Then, you give her a choice: loyalty or distance. She chooses distance. You watch her leave, and you feel something crack. Not your rule, but your heart. Just a little. Historians still argue whether you later imprisoned Kifunji, or if she defected to the Portuguese on her own. Fringe tales claim you allowed her to flee, then placed spies in her new household, so you'd always know her next move. The truth: you never speak of her again. Instead, you focus on the council. The Sobas grumble. Some say you've centralized too much power, that you've become more king than queen, that your taxes are steep, your justice swift. You invite them to court, all of them. You hold a great feast, open air torches, flickering dancers performing stories of your ancestors. You rise midway through the meal and give a speech about unity, about survival, about the encroaching foreign powers and the need for internal strength. Then you say it plainly. If I fall, we all fall. They understand. They may not love you, but they fear what comes without you. And fear, you've learned, is a perfectly usable form of loyalty. You begin establishing diplomatic links beyond the Portuguese sphere. Dutch traders arrive on your shores. They wear strange clothes, speak through interpreters, and show interest in your ivory and palm oil. You speak carefully using your sharpest Portuguese, knowing full well it's being translated back into Dutch. But you see something in their eyes: opportunity. They hate the Portuguese, and you have something they want: access, leverage, strategy. You don't sign anything, not yet. But you send gifts. You ask questions. You let them see your power without handing it over. It's a dance, and you've always been a great dancer. Meanwhile, word spreads that Njinga has become too powerful. The Portuguese governors in Luanda send for reinforcements. They plot a fresh campaign. They circle your borders, hoping for a sign of weakness. They'll wait a long time. You've already moved your capital inland, away from easy reach. You've trained messengers who can vanish into the jungle and reappear 3 days later with reports. Your soldiers don't march in lines. They melt into trees. A new kind of war is coming, and you're already 10 steps ahead. You sleep beside the river now, not because you have to, but because strategy often starts with silence. The sounds of rushing water help you think, and the trees along the Kwanzaa whisper things that courtiers never dare say aloud. You are Njinga, queen of a kingdom in exile. The Portuguese have chased you from your capital, stripped your titles on paper, and declared a new ruler in Ndongo. But paper burns, and so do puppet kings. You're in hiding technically, but this isn't the type of exile meant for waiting. This is where you plan your return, with a war council that meets under stars instead of lanterns, and a palace floor made of packed earth and sharpened spears. The wetlands around your riverside base become your fortress. The Portuguese fear the terrain thick with mud, mosquitoes, and spirits. They send patrols who vanish. They suspect disease or animal attacks. You suspect otherwise. Historians still debate whether you employed ritual magic in your defense strategy. Fringe accounts claim your women warriors would smear themselves with white clay and appear from the undergrowth like ghosts, chanting ancestral names and striking down intruders before fading back into the night. It worked. Psychological warfare was your best early weapon. You rebuild your court from scratch. This time, it's mobile, flexible, Like smoke, it cannot be contained. You meet with Sobas who've defected from Portuguese control, offering protection, shared trade, and status in your river court. The further the enemy reaches, the less ground they hold. And now they're overreaching. Back in Luanda, a new governor has arrived, more aggressive than the last. He ramps up raids, torches food stores, and launches surprise attacks on villages believed to harbor your scouts. He believes you're running scared. You send him a message. One morning, a Portuguese officer rides into a quiet town and finds a tree adorned with red feathers, your symbol. Hanging from a branch is a satchel. Inside is a Portuguese map defaced in charcoal with one word scratched in Kimbundu watch. A few days later, an entire supply caravan disappears. You don't strike directly. Not yet. You bleed them slowly. You poison wells. You free captives. You bribe translators. You twist every element of war into a game of misdirection. Meanwhile, your people grow more loyal. Here in the Riverlands, no one forgets who protected them when the Portuguese burned their homes. No one forgets which queen shares meals praise with elders and fights alongside soldiers. Mainstream historians credit you with mastering guerrilla warfare long before it became a colonial resistance playbook. You didn't invent it, but you wielded it like a machete in tall grass. Even your enemies begin to respect you. One missionary writes that you are more dangerous than 10 battalions. Another, less composed, simply calls you the Serpent of the South. You like that one. But danger isn't your only legacy. In exile, you become something larger than a monarch. You become a myth. Children tell stories of you turning invisible at will, of you sleeping with your eyes open, of the spirits of slain ancestors rising around your campfires to guide your next attack. You encourage some of these tales. Others you let evolve on their own. Either way, fear becomes your armor. Yet exile takes a toll. Food grows scarce. Morale strains. Some Sobas grow impatient. They want bold action marches, sieges, blood. You give them something better: plans. You begin sending secret envoys into Matamba, a neighboring kingdom ruled by an aging queen and her sons. It's a spiritual land bound by ancient customs and guarded by a proud people. But it's vulnerable, and it's critical, because Matamba offers high ground. And better yet, Matamba offers legitimacy. You propose an alliance first. Tribute, mutual defense, a marriage perhaps. But the queen is wary, too slow, too weak. One of her sons mocks you openly. You respond the way only you can. At dawn, your soldiers storm the Matamba capital, not with brutality but with precision. You walk straight into the throne room, barefoot, robed in white, flanked by your women warriors, and offer the queen a seat beside you rather than beneath you. She accepts. Historians confirm that this swift transfer of power was one of the most brilliant takeovers in the region's history. Matamba became yours not just through force, but through tact. You absorbed its traditions, maintained its rituals, and respected its sacred laws. But you also made it yours. You established a new capital, secure, well-protected, deep in forested hills. A court reborn. A queen not just of Ndongo, but of Matamba. 2 kingdoms, 1 ruler. But your enemies don't rest. The Portuguese, furious at your Matamba move, issue a bounty. 1,000 silver pieces for your captured, dead or alive. They send bounty hunters, traitors, former friends. One of them finds your camp. You welcome him into your tent. Offer him food. Let him eat. And then, as he reaches for his wine, you tell him exactly how many days it took you to find out his true mission. You lean forward, whispering, "They should have sent someone who knew how to lie better." He doesn't make it back to Luanda. And now no one trusts the bounty posters. You grow more emboldened. You rename parts of the kingdom. You adopt titles like Mother of the People and She Who Returns. You start holding weekly court sessions open to any citizen, no matter their rank. You rule not just by decree, but by presence. Fringe legends say you once healed a child's fever with a prayer and a strand of your own hair. The mother still keeps it in a calabash gourd under her bed. You don't correct the story? Why would you? A queen in exile is dangerous. But a queen in 2 kingdoms, she's unstoppable. They say power changes a person. But in your case, power doesn't change you, it crystallizes you. Solidifies what's already there, like sap hardening into amber. You are now Queen of Matamba and Queen of Ndongo, 2 thrones balanced on a knife's edge, and you walk it barefoot. Your enemies called you a ghost, a shadow, a woman, clinging to fading claims. But now they can't ignore the obvious: you've returned stronger. And this time, you brought a kingdom with you. You begin governing from Matamba, which at first feels strange. It's older than Ndongo in spirit, but smaller, quieter, thick with ancestral rules and forests that whisper ancient things. But it bends to you slowly. You make offerings. You consult the elders. You don't replace Matamba's spirit customs, you honor them. And when the time is right, you bring Ndongo back into the conversation. You declare that the two kingdoms are now united under your rule. A double crown, a double curse, some say. But most your warriors, your scribes, the mothers who lost sons to Portuguese muskets, they call it justice. Historians still puzzle over how you managed such a merger without full-blown civil war. The common theory: you didn't demand obedience, you absorbed loyalty. Like a river, not a blade. Still trouble brews. Your sister Mukumbu stirs from the shadows. With Mbandi long gone, and Kifunji vanished into silence, she steps forward as the next sibling with a grievance. She claims blood rights, says the spirits chose her, says you've grown too friendly with foreigners and too masculine in your rulership. She wears red, not your shade, but crimson dyed from tree bark, darker and more symbolic. She gathers a modest force and vanishes into the northern bush. You let her go. Not out of mercy, but because you're watching something else. A letter arrives from the Pope. Yes, that Pope. He's heard of you. Your baptism, your court, your defiance, your reforms. He sends a blessing, formal, flowery, and absolutely soaked in political implications. The Vatican is extending spiritual legitimacy to your rule, not just as a Christian convert, but as sovereign of your lands. It's subtle, but you know what it means. Rome is preparing for the future. The Portuguese are no longer their only horse in the race. You've made yourself useful to them, maybe even preferable. You offer Christian piety without the colonial drama. You wear the cross and the crown, and they're paying attention. Mainstream historians consider this letter a turning point. Not for your power, but for your international recognition. You go from regional monarch to global curiosity. European maps begin labeling Queen Njinga's territories in ink, not guesswork. You respond diplomatically. You thank the Pope. You send symbolic gifts. Ivory, cloth, a carved crucifix said to have been touched by your own hand. You understand the power of image, of myth. At the same time, you're preparing for war. Because Luanda is growing restless again. A new Portuguese commander has landed, young, ambitious, fluent in Kimbundu. Dangerous. He believes you're the final obstacle to full colonial dominance. He starts courting rival Sobas, offering silver and gunpowder in exchange for betrayal. You strike first, not with an army, but with marriage. You arrange for your niece, your late brother's only surviving child, to wed a powerful Soba, whose lands border Portuguese territory. It's a bold move. A signal to all the royal bloodline flows forward, and it will not yield. Fringe accounts claim you personally interviewed every suitor before choosing him. That you asked them what they feared most, and only the one who answered, a woman who needs no man, was allowed to proceed. The marriage is spectacular. Drums. Palm wine. A new treaty sealed with blood and cassava flour. And through it you gain access to river routes that allow your traders to bypass Portuguese checkpoints entirely. The Portuguese retaliate. They accuse you of harboring escaped slaves. You are. They accuse you of arming rebellious chiefs. You are. They accuse you of being unholy. You raise your crucifix and remind them you were baptized in their own cathedral. They don't laugh. War returns. Not the rolling battles of European armies, but the grinding, choking kind. Supply raids, night ambushes, spies caught with silk maps, and teeth dyed with truth-telling roots. A border town burns. A caravan vanishes. Your soldiers strike and disappear like wind. But this time you don't just fight to win. You fight to last. You build bunkers hidden beneath villages. You move women and children inland. You assign guards to granaries, train elders in emergency codes, even create mobile chapels, so Christian rituals can continue without fixed targets. You fight like someone who understands time better than bullets. Historians note that your military campaigns begin blending tactics. African terrain knowledge with European siege planning, spiritual morale with logistical brilliance. You are in every way rewriting the manual of how an African queen fights a colonial war. And still, every night, you pray. Quietly. Sometimes with your priest. Sometimes alone. Sometimes under the stars with your hands in the dirt and your eyes closed, breathing in the memory of your father's last words. You don't record those prayers, but you remember every word. Because you're not just building a kingdom anymore. You're building a legacy. You step into the square before sunrise sword at your hip robes folded high at the hem, revealing the thick leather sandals of a soldier, not a monarch. Your soldiers are already waiting. They rise with the sun now just like you, not because you command them to, but because they've come to believe something quietly powerful, that a ruler who shares the burden of dawn is worth following into darkness. Today is no ceremony. Today is a drill. You walk the line, inspecting formations, adjusting stances, pointing out loose belts, unpolished blades. You nod at the woman with the scar over her eye. She earned it holding a bridge last summer. You exchange a glance with your captain, who knows that if this new governor in Luanda tries to move against you, these fighters will be the only thing standing between your people and chains. You didn't always dress like this. There was a time you wore only robes, moved through halls on polished floors, lounged on cushions woven by hand. But not anymore. Now you wear armor. And sometimes when no one is looking, you sleep in it. The shift began the day you reclaimed Matamba. Once it had been ruled by a queen who wore golden beads and consulted bone readers before breakfast. You kept the beads. But you also installed a forge, a barracks, a war academy. Mainstream historians still marvel at your military reforms. You don't just train soldiers. You restructure logistics. You establish rotating supply lines, embed messengers in forests, create coded drumming sequences for long-distance alerts. Some say you invented an early form of battlefield triage, treating wounded fighters before they could bleed out under the canopy. You appoint a new council divided into 3 rings: war, diplomacy, and faith. Each answers to you. Each knows you can replace them in a breath. You hold court dressed in armor now, a polished breastplate over flowing robes. When you enter the chamber, you don't sit on the throne immediately. You walk the room. Make them sweat. Let them wonder who you'll look at first. You've learned that silence is as sharp as steel, and so is memory. You remember every name of every chief who betrayed your father, every village that hesitated to aid you in exile, every priest who once called you a misguided pagan and now bows too low. You forgive most of them, but never all. One day a letter arrives from Luanda. The Portuguese governor writes, in careful ink-blotted script, that he is eager to return to fruitful diplomacy. He requests a personal envoy be received at your court. You know this game. You agree, then handpick the room. You arrange the chairs so that yours is not highest, but furthest from the door. A subtle message: if they want to flee, they'll have to get past your entire council first. The envoy arrives in pomp silks, incense guarded by men too clean to know real battle. He brings wine. You don't drink it. He brings flattery. You let it float unanswered. And then he brings a proposal. A truce. No more raids. Reduce tribute. Formal recognition of your rule in both Matamba and Ndongo. They offer a cross and a crown. You keep a steady face. Historians debate your next move. Some say you wept with joy. Others say you rose, smiled, and walked out without speaking. The truth, like so much in your life, is likely somewhere between drama and diplomacy. You don't say yes. You say, let me pray on it. Because you know when the enemy offers peace, it usually means they've grown tired or weak. You stall for time. While they wait, you visit the training grounds. You oversee grain distribution. You sit with your old warriors and ask what they need. You don't rule from above, you rule from within. One night around a fire, a child asks if you're a king or a queen. You smile and say, depends on the day. The child laughs. You don't correct them, because the truth is you're both. You're the one who rides into battle with braids tucked under a helmet, and the one who sings lullabies to the orphans brought into your camp. The one who writes diplomatic letters in 3 languages, and who once sat on a human stool to outwit a governor. You are contradiction made flesh. You are strategy given soul. But not all contradictions survive forever. That year, your favorite horse collapses from exhaustion. You bury it behind the palace yourself. The next day, you order the army to walk no mounts for a week. If I can lose something I love, you say so can you. It becomes a ritual of solidarity. You hear the Jesuits in Luanda have begun preaching sermons about you. Some warn of your ambition. Others praise your leadership. A few call you Queen Njinga, God's thorn. You like that one. But not as much as you like what comes next. You begin writing letters to other European powers, not just the Dutch, but the English, the Spanish, even the French. You play them against each other. You let rumors drift that you may accept their missionaries, their trade deals, their silver. You become not just a queen, but a broker, a voice in the corridors of European colonial strategy. You don't plan to trust any of them, but you'll gladly make them compete. Fringe accounts say you once told a missionary, "Let them all fight over my favor. That way, they'll never have time to fight me." It sounds like you. You hold your power like a closed fist now, tightly, deliberately. But inside, it's not anger driving you anymore. It's endurance, because empires fall. But legends, they keep walking. They come for you through smoke, not as an army, but as whispers, rumors, the kind of subtle threats that don't raise flags but turn stomachs. One by one, things start going wrong. A caravan disappears. A trusted advisor is found dead in his hut, a knife in his back, no footprints leading in or out. A grain store burns even though it was guarded. And then, most chillingly, one of your war council seats is found empty with only a folded Portuguese flag in its place. This is not a battle. This is a message. And you know exactly who it's from. Your spies confirm what you already suspect: the Portuguese aren't just coming with muskets anymore. They're coming with puppets. New rulers installed in your absence, men with vague family claims to the throne of Ndongo. They parade through villages with gold-tipped staffs and scrolls from Luanda, promising peace, protection, and tax exemptions. Your people, hungry and weary from years of war, hesitate. Some chiefs start bending. You don't panic. You plan. You summon the Sobas to court, not for threats but for stories. You sit in a circle with them, cross-legged, no crown. You ask them to remember what it was like when Portuguese soldiers marched into villages without warning. When the people were taken. When fields burned. Then you say softly, "A gift from the Portuguese often comes with a rope." They nod, slowly, heavily, but you know not all will stay loyal. So you build something new, a loyalty map. You divide your kingdom into rings: the heartland, the outer villages, the fringe. You color-code every Soba by reliability. You assign envoys, not warriors' wives, sisters' cousins, women whose loyalty can't be bought, only tested. They bring gifts. They deliver messages. They listen. Historians still marvel at your informal spy network. It was never written down. It was relational, familial, built on trust and blood rather than parchment and seal. One European trader called it an empire held together by whispers. At the same time, you start reshaping the court. You bring in new voices, people the Portuguese wouldn't expect. A healer from a hill tribe. A weaver whose family resisted taxation. A teenage scout who once crossed enemy lines to bring you a letter. You surround yourself not with flatterers, but with mirrors, people who remind you what this fight is really about. But the danger isn't just external anymore. Inside your palace, politics tighten like vines. Some of your generals are getting too ambitious. One suggests retaking Luanda. Another wants to form a mercenary pact with Dutch traders, offering ports in exchange for troops. A third proposes marrying off your niece to a rival family you very much don't trust. You listen. Then you dismiss them. Not publicly, but permanently. They vanish into quiet exile, given land and food, but no voice. You don't execute them. That would create martyrs. You let them become irrelevant. You know sometimes silence is louder than death. Meanwhile, the puppet kings installed by Portugal begin to parade more boldly. One of them, a second cousin named Hari, declares himself Ngola of all Ndongo. He walks into a village wearing robes patterned with Catholic crosses and waves a paper crown blessed by a priest. You watch from afar. You wait 3 weeks. Then, under the cover of fog, you send a dozen riders into the village. They don't draw swords. They carry paper. Royal decrees sealed with your emblem stamped in 3 languages, read aloud in every square. The message is simple. You may wear a crown, but you'll never carry a kingdom. By the time dawn breaks, Hari's supporters are gone. The villagers are singing your name. Fringe accounts say you had Hari exiled, not killed. You told him a dog who barks for its master dies when the master does. Go home. Learn silence. Another puppet is crowned weeks later. You don't react. Instead, you begin building temples. Not large ones. Modest shrines scattered across the kingdom. Places where people can gather light candles, whisper names, grieve safely. You commission icons of saints, but dressed in local garb. Black Marys, warrior Josephs, even a version of Saint Sebastian who looks suspiciously like your great-uncle. The people love it. The Jesuits in Luanda do not. They accuse you of heresy, of mixing sacred traditions with pagan imagery. You respond with a letter. It begins, "Was not Christ born under stars? And have we not seen the same stars?" They fall silent for a while after that, but not for long. A new missionary arrives, a tall man with pale eyes and an unshakable accent. He claims to bring a message of peace, but he starts asking too many questions about troop movements, about grain storage, about river routes. You have him followed. He meets with a traitor, one of your own scribes. You confront the missionary at court. You do not shout. You do not accuse. You simply hand him a parchment detailing his own journey, dated and logged. Then you hand him another scroll, an official escort back to Luanda. He doesn't return. Your court grows quieter after that, more focused, less theatrical. And through it all, you remain unshaken. You don't need to raise your voice anymore, because every whisper in the court already carries your name. Night falls over the royal compound, like a curtain drawn by invisible hands. Crickets buzz in the underbrush, and the rhythmic thud of distant drums carries through the trees, slow, steady, ceremonial. It's not a celebration. It's a warning. You stand at the edge of your war council chamber, arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon where moonlight dances over the Kwanzaa River. Your generals are seated behind you, waiting, shifting uneasily. Not because they fear the enemy, but because of what you've just proposed. A royal guard made entirely of women. The murmurs began the moment you mentioned it. Not from fear. Not even from skepticism. From discomfort. "This isn't how it's done," they said. "It's not tradition. It's not wise. Women defend homes, not thrones." You turned slowly, deliberately, and asked, "Then why am I the one ruling that shut them up?" But silence is not the same as agreement. So now, you move quietly. One by one, you begin recruiting not from noble families, but from the overlooked daughters of fallen warriors, widows of betrayed chiefs, orphan girls who have nothing to lose but everything to prove. You train them yourself. Swordplay, yes. Archery, yes. But more than that, discipline, formation, tactics. You teach them how to move like shadows, to read terrain, to fight not just for glory, but for each other. Historians confirmed the existence of your all-female royal guard, dozens, strong, highly trained, fiercely loyal. The Portuguese called them demons in skirts. You called them my sisters in steel. One of them, Adia, becomes your right hand. She sleeps outside your chamber door every night, hand on her blade. Once she stops an assassin with nothing but a kitchen knife and a ceramic plate. You promote her to captain the same night. The image spreads quickly. Queen Njinga, protected not by foreign mercenaries or tribal strongmen, but by women in crimson tunics, standing tall with spears glinting in the dawn. Fringe stories claim they took a vow of celibacy, wore charms against gunpowder, and could smell poison in a cup of wine. None of that's confirmed, but no one dares test it either. Alongside the rise of your female guard, another group becomes increasingly vital to your court, the Ngangas. Spiritual mediums, healers, dream interpreters. You've always believed in the spirits. Your birth alone was a signal of something greater. But now you begin formalizing their place in statecraft. Before each major battle, you consult the Ngangas. They read smoke scatterbones, mutter into flames. They whisper warnings. They offer blessings. Sometimes they simply say, "Not today." And you listen. Not because you're afraid of ghosts, but because you understand that fear itself is a tool. You make sure the Portuguese know you speak to the dead, that you've spoken to your father, that he still answers. They roll their eyes, but they move more cautiously. Back in Luanda, new reports describe you as a dangerous mystic queen, one who uses sorcery and feminine seduction to undermine colonial stability. You smile at that. Let them think you use magic. You know it's just good intelligence, perfect timing, and a memory sharper than any blade in your arsenal. Still, your war becomes more than physical. It becomes spiritual. You begin incorporating rituals into your leadership. Before major council meetings, you burn herbs in a ceremonial bowl. You touch the heads of your soldiers before battle. You carry a pouch of sacred stones at your waist, right next to your dagger. You start dressing differently again. Sometimes in full armor. Sometimes in feathers and copper. Sometimes barefoot, wrapped in white robes, like a river priestess. You become fluid, unpredictable, impossible to pin down. And in doing so, you become mythic. Portuguese soldiers refuse to say your name aloud during night watch. Some claim to have seen your figure in the fog even hundreds of miles from where you're supposed to be. One captain swears your eyes glowed red during a skirmish. Another insists you turned into a hawk mid-battle and flew away. You deny none of it. Because your enemies don't just fight your armies, they fight your presence. And still you plan. You begin holding midnight strategy sessions not because they're more effective, but because they unsettle your advisors, just enough to keep them honest. You light the room with oil lamps and speak in low tones, always calm, always measured. One night, you say, they expect brute force. We'll give them uncertainty. So you adapt your tactics. No more head-on confrontations. You fragment your forces. Strike in waves. Burn their crops. Poison their wells. Capture their translators. You never take the same path twice. Soon they begin fortifying even when they're not attacked. You are wearing them out. And still you remain composed. You hold court in the morning, train at noon, visit the infirmary by afternoon, and walk the garden paths in the evening. Even your enemies admit it. Njinga never tires. But inside, you feel it. A weariness that no ritual can fix. A loneliness that no number of guards can banish. You miss your sister, even after her betrayal. You miss the quiet nights by the river, when your only burden was survival. But now you carry kingdoms. So you let that longing harden into resolve. Because you've learned one more thing more dangerous than weapons, more enduring than power. Faith. Not in gods or letters from Rome, but in yourself. You kneel in a dark chapel. The candlelight flickers over worn wooden beams, casting trembling shadows that stretch across the floor like reaching hands. You are dressed in white modest and silent, your back straight, and head slightly bowed. A crucifix hangs in front of you. Not gold, not ornate. Simple wood, carved by local hands, worn smooth by fingers that came before yours. You whisper a prayer not because you expect an answer, but because the ritual matters. Then you rise. You exit the chapel and walk past guards who salute in silence. Outside, the sunlight is harsh, real unforgiving. A courier waits for you with another dispatch from Luanda. The Portuguese are preparing for another assault. This time, they've gathered both military and missionary forces. Soldiers and Jesuits alike. They're calling it a divine cleansing. They claim you've gone too far mixing Christian symbols with ancestral rites. You are, they say, leading a rebellion of heretics. You don't laugh, because this part is serious. They found a new weapon morality, or at least their version of it. They now try to shame you, not just shoot at you. To brand you not just as a rebel, but as a blasphemer. A danger not just to their power, but to souls. You know the game. You played it once when you let them baptize you, when you knelt and took the name Ana de Souza. You wore the cross. You recited the prayers. You even had a priest at your side for a few seasons of battle. But you always knew faith is only useful when it serves the people. So now you double down. You don't reject Christianity. You redefine it. You invite Jesuits to your court, but on your terms. They're allowed to preach, yes, but they must also sit through rituals of the ancestors. They must witness the Ngangas at work. They must listen to chants sung in Kimbundu before they get to read from Latin scrolls. One leaves in horror. Another stays and listens. Mainstream historians note this period as one of profound religious complexity in your court. You didn't build a kingdom of either or. You built a kingdom of both and. Jesus beside the spirits, crosses beside calabash gourds, Latin beside fire dust symbols etched into dirt. Fringe stories say you once held a sermon in full armor, a rosary in one hand, a machete in the other. It might be true. You establish new rules. Missionaries must learn Kimbundu before teaching the gospel. You create your own catechism tailored to your people's experiences. You declare that Jesus must look like your people, walk like them, speak like them. You refuse to let God remain foreign. And still you fight. Because faith doesn't stop the bullets. The Portuguese raid a village along the river claiming it harbors rebel sympathizers. They torch homes, enslave families, desecrate a shrine. You hear about it within hours. You don't call it a tragedy. You call it a spark. You ride out with your guard. No heavy banners. No procession. Just 30 women in crimson and iron moving fast through the forest. You arrive by dusk. The Portuguese garrison is not expecting you. By dawn, they are gone. You leave behind a single sign, a crucifix charred at the edges, nailed to a Portuguese musket. The message is clear: you won't surrender your faith, but you won't be ruled by theirs. Luanda is furious. They issue another letter to the Vatican. This time, they call you the Jezebel of the South, claiming you twist sacred doctrine and mock the Church. The Vatican does not reply. Historians still argue why. Some say Rome was distracted. Others believe they were simply tired of the Portuguese losing. But word spreads, not just in Africa, but across the Atlantic. In Brazil, slaves whisper your name during late-night prayers. In Portugal, merchants debate whether your kingdom is a threat or a potential trading partner. Even Dutch merchants begin to reconsider if you can resist the Portuguese this long. Maybe there's something in it for them too. Meanwhile, back at court, you make another move. You establish a new council, the Sisters of the Fire. All women, all trained in faith, diplomacy, and war. They serve as mediators, negotiators, spiritual leaders. You dispatch them to remote provinces where they set up schools, settle disputes, and quietly remind everyone who really rules. The people love them. They say these women never shout, never curse, never carry swords, and yet they're obeyed faster than generals. You know why. They carry your spirit. You become less visible in daily life, not out of weakness, but out of purpose. You let the image of you grow in size. You appear at feasts sparingly. When you do, your presence stuns like thunder. Your robes shift again. Now, sometimes all black, sometimes all white, sometimes a mixed night and day sewn together like you're saying, I contain it all. Fringe accounts claim you commissioned a robe sewn with real river stones at the hem so your feet would always remember the weight of home. Your enemies start dreaming about you. Literally. A Portuguese officer deserts, claiming he's seen you in his sleep standing over his bed with a burning cross. Another insists he woke to find his rosary knotted in a noose. They start calling you the nun and the gun. A woman of God, a queen of war. You do not deny it. You embrace it. Because what they don't understand is that for you, faith was never just belief. It was strategy, power, protection. It was the only shield they couldn't confiscate. And if they feared your prayers, good. You'd already turned them into weapons. They say war is loud. Muskets, cannons, cries of men. But the kind of war you're fighting now, it begins with fruit. A basket of perfectly ripe guavas, sweet and fragrant, delivered as a peace gift to a Portuguese commander stationed upriver. You know the village it comes from. You know the soil. You know how to cultivate guavas that taste like honey and how to lace them with just enough sleeping herb to paralyze a garrison. By morning, the commander is face down in his tent mouth, stained red. Not blood, just pulp. You don't even send a message, because the fruit was the message. This is your kind of warfare, now symbolic, subtle, and devastating. The Portuguese know you're watching their every move. They feel it in the way their trade routes collapse, their messengers disappear, their allies change sides without warning. Every tree might be a lookout. Every merchant might be your spy. Every prayer might contain your name. You've become the presence behind the silence. Back in Luanda, they're desperate. Another governor is removed. A new one appointed a hardliner named Correia. He's furious, brutal, and far less diplomatic than his predecessors. He blames the priests. He blames the trade unions. Eventually, he just blames you. He increases raids. He captures innocent villagers and parades them through the streets in chains. This, he says, is what happens to those who follow Njinga. You respond by freeing an entire Portuguese labor camp at night without a single shot fired. Historians still don't understand how you pulled it off. Fringe accounts say you used a path known only to crocodile herders and sang old lullabies that hypnotized the guards. More likely, you had maps. You had insiders. You had plans. Correia retaliates by sending word to Lisbon that Angola must be cleansed of the Njinga plague. He requests reinforcements. You intercept the message before it leaves the river. You burn it. Then you write one of your own, same parchment, same seal, same wax. Only your message reads, the Queen offers you mercy once. Just once. Or you send it downriver. Whether it ever reaches Lisbon doesn't matter. He reads it. The next day, Correa orders the construction of a massive outpost fortress near your border. Big walls, big cannons, big mistake, because you let him finish building it. Then you make your move. You don't storm it. You don't even approach it. Instead, you wait until supply chains are thin. Morale is low and rainy season floods the trail. Then your warriors light 3 fires along the tree line. Just 3. Not a raid. A symbol. Correa evacuates the fortress that same night. You don't even want the building. You just wanted them to leave it behind. Now it's yours. Your soldiers rename it the empty shell. It becomes a training ground. A symbol. A joke whispered at campfires. They built our barracks for us, your captain chuckles. And you don't laugh. But you smile. Because this isn't just winning battles. This is rewriting the physics of war. Your army doesn't just grow, it evolves. You begin training decoy units, small bands who make noise in one direction, while real forces move from another. You use mirrors to send messages across ridges. You plant fake footprints, create false camps, even forge Portuguese uniforms, to walk straight into enemy stores and walk back out with supplies. You make war a game of shadows, and in that game, no one wins against you. But it's not all victories. One of your scouts is captured in Ndongo, a woman you raised from childhood, one of your fiercest. They hang her outside Luanda's fort walls with a placard around her neck that reads, Witch of Njinga. You send no army to retrieve her body. You send a song. A slow mourning hymn sung in Kimbundu carried by a single flutist who walks the perimeter of the Portuguese fort at dusk. One note, one breath, repeated for hours. By dawn, Ndongo's body is gone. No one sees who took it. Her grave is never found. Only a stone remains somewhere near the river marked with a single spiral, your symbol for loyalty. Historians often struggle with this part of your legacy. They ask, were you ruthless? Were you merciful? Did you love your people or just use them brilliantly? But the answer is simple. You belong to them. Fully, fiercely, forever. You weren't just their queen. You were their revenge. Meanwhile, word reaches you that a Portuguese trading post has fallen into internal conflict. Its governor is ill. His second in command is angling for power. You send a letter. No threats. No offers. Just 3 words. Decide before dawn. By morning, the outpost has a new leader and a secret trade agreement with Matamba. Even your enemies are starting to think if you can't beat her, don't try. But one thing still eludes you. Ndongo, the capital, your birthright. Still occupied by colonial allies. Still flying banners not your own. Still home to the mat where your father once placed your feet in goat's blood and called you fierce. You don't say it aloud, but every plan now bends toward one horizon return. It starts as many great things do with a whisper. A messenger arrives at midnight panting cloak, soaked from rain. Eyes wide, with something not quite fear, not quite hope. He kneels at your feet and says only this. The puppet king of Ndongo is dead. No details, no suspects, just silence and a gap in the throne. You rise slowly. Not like someone waking from sleep, but like a tide that always knew it was coming back. You don't speak for a long moment. Then you say, it's time. The council erupts. Some argue it's a trap, that the Portuguese will fill the gap within days, that it's too soon, that Matamba isn't fortified enough, that you should send a proxy. You listen, then you walk away, because you've already decided. You gather your commanders, the red-feathered generals, the sisters of the fire, the Ngangas. One question. How do we return? Not if, not when. How? They give you plans, timelines, risk assessments. You hear them all and then you rewrite everything. No parades, no sieges. You'll return to Ndongo not as a conqueror, but as a ghost when you to we. Unsopu Babakyansen, we dinjikushu, Mastun dasib disapan a water runnets. Your record court vanishes overnight. No lights, no noise, no movement. With the Portuguese here heard nothing. Traders are turned away, messengers say you've gone north or south or died or disappeared into the mountains. But in truth, you're circling. Every river port is watched. Every bridge is marked. Every village elder is given a sealed scroll instructions for when to move, where to stand, what to say when the time comes. Historians still can't trace The exact network of signals. Some say it was a coded drum sequence. Others suggest colored cloths hung from doorways. One legend says you sent a feather to every loyal soba, and they knew. However, you did it the moment arrives. You crossed the river at dawn, not with 1,000 soldiers, but with 30 of your fiercest warriors cloaked in smoke from the morning mist. Red paint streaked across your cheeks. You don't charge into Ndongo. You walk through the lower provinces, through fields that once burned, through villages where children shout your name and elders cry at your feet. No resistance, not a musket raised, because before you arrived, your name had already done the work. In every village, your Sisters of the Fire had preceded you, resolving disputes, giving aid, reminding the people of who protected them when the governors didn't. When you reach the capital gates, they're open. No guards, no warnings, just a city that has been waiting. Your old palace stands quiet. You dismount, walk up the steps, place your hand on the stone threshold, and for the first time in decades, Queen Njinga of Ndongo and Matamba returns home. You don't celebrate. Not yet. You gather the people in the square. No throne, no banners, just you standing beneath a jacaranda tree blooming purple overhead. You speak plainly. This is not victory. This is return. You don't list your accomplishments. You name the dead, the exiled, the lost. You say their names aloud one by one until the silence is heavier than mourning, until even the wind seems to stop. Then you say, this land belongs to us again, but only if we guard it not just with swords, but with wisdom. You make no grand decrees that day, just one. You open the old council halls to everyone. For the next month, your court is flooded with voices, farmers, traders, grandmothers, orphaned boys. They tell you what went wrong, what was stolen, what must be rebuilt. And you listen. Mainstream historians call this the first known listening court in Angolan history. You made it tradition held 4 times a year, no matter the season, no matter the war. Your enemies scoffed, your people remembered, but of course nothing goes uncontested. The Portuguese respond quickly. They send a letter denying your claim to the throne. You send it back unopened. They try again, this time addressed to Her Grace the Governor of Matamba. You return it with a note, I am queen. You do not name me. So they stop writing, and they start marching. Troop movements along the southern river. A fleet of supply ships spotted off the coast. You see what's coming. So you build not just walls, but futures. You train young boys and girls in self-defense, in foraging and medicine. You call it the 100 hands, and every village has them. You move your capital again, not abandoning the old one, but expanding to create twin centers of power. One for tradition, one for action. You make your system too flexible to break. And when the Portuguese finally attack, they find empty roads. Traps in the hills, drums echoing from places that don't exist on maps. Their ships never reach port. Their soldiers never find the palace. And their quick war stretches into a long nightmare. Because now your kingdom fights like you. Patient, ruthless, relentless. They burn villages, you rebuild them by morning. They capture a trade route. You open another one in secret. They demand surrender. You answer with fruit. And not the poisoned kind this time. You send a single mango to their commander, perfectly ripe. With a note pinned to its side, you're not the first. You won't be the last. You vanish into the trees. Not in fear, but in design. The Portuguese, still smarting from failed offensives and diplomatic slaps, have begun sending in smaller units, now scouting patrols, quick raids, hit and run parties, armed with muskets and desperation. They think they're adapting, but they're walking straight into your classroom. You take to the forests, not because you have to, but because you know them better than they ever will. You've memorized the bends in every path, the twist of every vine, the trees that flower in defiance of season. Your warriors call it the Queen's Garden. And in this garden, invaders do not bloom. Your troops melt into the foliage. They set snares from reeds, dig pits masked with palm fronds, and coat spear tips with sap so toxic even a scratch ends dreams. One patrol disappears for 3 weeks. When a few survivors crawl back to Luanda, they speak of whispers in the dark and red-eyed shadows, that laughed in the leaves. You don't need to confirm or deny. Let the jungle speak for you. And yet this is not the life of a fugitive. This is the life of a phantom monarch, a queen whose palace has no walls, and whose throne rests wherever she chooses to sit. You hold court beneath canopies now. You speak to chiefs around fires made of citrus wood. You revise alliances not with paperwork, but with shared meals, old stories, and the quiet wisdom of elders. Mainstream historians call this your guerrilla era. But it's more than that. It's not just about battle, it's about becoming unreachable. You're no longer just defending territory. You are shaping legend. You begin choosing forested sites for mobile shrines. Places where the people can come, light a fire, offer a prayer, and feel your presence, whether you're actually there or not. One such shrine is said to sing. No instruments, no humans. Just the wind catching bamboo tubes in a precise arrangement creating melodies that echo like chanting. Fringe tales say you stood there once cloaked in leaves and wept, not from sadness, but from sheer power. Because this is what you've built a kingdom, where you don't need to be seen to be felt. Still, you do appear when needed. A neighboring chief defects to the Portuguese, swearing loyalty in exchange for coin and flintlocks. He raises 3 villages along your trade routes. You don't send an army. You walk into his compound, alone, a woman in gray with no weapons visible. Your guards wait a mile behind. You step into his circle and ask for tea. He stutters. You sit, and you say drink first. He doesn't. The cup remains untouched. That evening, his troops find him paralyzed but breathing. Eyes open, but empty. His people defect back to you within a week. No one ever figures out what you said. You return to your base where your commanders await a debrief. You don't give one. You just say, we move tomorrow. Because the forest never stays still. And neither do you. That's when you hear of the Imbangala. Warriors, nomads, cannibals some say, bound by blood oaths, armor made of iron and bone, followers of chaos. They are feared by everyone. Even the Portuguese can't control them. But you don't fear what others do. You see opportunity. You send an envoy, no gifts, no promises, just a single line. Let us speak as those who walk without chains. To everyone's astonishment, they agree. The meeting is deep in neutral bushland. You arrive dressed not as a queen, but as a warrior. Bare arms, braided hair, machete on your back. The Mbangala chief greets you with a gesture somewhere between respect and threat. You sit. You don't blink. You speak of war, of power, of legacy. But most of all, you speak of survival. They listen. Because what you offer is not submission. It's alliance. Historians still debate how much you truly adopted their customs. Some say you performed blood rites, walked barefoot over embers, even participated in cannibal feasts. Others insist you merely tolerated their ways to achieve your ends. You never clarify, and honestly, you never should. The Mbangala join your campaign. Not fully, not like your own people, but as shock troops, raiders, disruptors. They attack Portuguese holdings from angles no one guards. They vanish like wind. One night, an entire outpost is stripped, clean walls, intact guns, missing guards tied up unharmed with feathers left in their mouths. Message received. Back at court, your own advisors grow nervous. They don't trust the Mbangala. You say neither do I. But I don't trust fire either. And yet, I use it to cook. It becomes a proverb. Your tactics now shift even further. With Mbangala power bolstering your guerrilla networks, you strike bolder. Not just against Portuguese patrols, but their very supply chains. You seize warehouses, intercept merchant ships, poison water caches intended for Luanda-bound trade. And most effectively, you start welcoming deserters. Portuguese soldiers, mercenaries, missionaries who've lost their faith. You give them bread. You ask them questions. You send most home empty-handed, yes, but alive, with a warning. Some you keep. And those few, they become your map makers. Because maps, after all, are just stories written in straight lines. And no one tells a better story than you. The forest is breathing with you now. Not just hiding you, but helping you. Paths clear when you pass. Birds fall silent before danger. Even the wind seems to hush when you stop to listen. You've spent so long in the trees that the capital begins to feel like a rumor. A place built on stone instead of trust. But this is real. This is alive. This is how you fight now. And you're not fighting alone. The Imbangala, your unlikely allies, bring chaos, where you bring control. Where your warriors march in formation, theirs move like insects, spreading out, burrowing and striking from every direction. Where you plan 3 steps ahead, they strike without warning, then vanish with mocking laughter. It's a strange partnership. One of your commanders asks, can beasts truly be allies? You reply, if they eat our enemies first, I'll sharpen their teeth myself. It's not just bravado. You mean it. But you don't lose your grip. You allow the Imbangala to raid, to frighten, to scatter your foes, but not without boundaries. You place envoys in their camps. Women from your court trained in language, ritual, and diplomacy. They don't command, but they advise. And advise well. Fringe tales say one of your envoys once stopped a blood ceremony mid-chant with a single stare. That her name became a curse among the most reckless warriors. Maybe. What is true is this. You keep the Imbangala close, not because you love their methods, but because you understand their purpose. They're your storm, unpredictable, terrifying, and necessary. Meanwhile, your relationship with your own people deepens. You begin traveling again, not in parades, but in quiet visits. You appear at births, funerals, harvests. Sometimes you arrive on foot with only one guard. Sometimes you sit on the ground beside elders and listen to stories you've heard 100 times. You let them know you have not disappeared. They love you for it, not because you rule, but because you remember. In one village, you heal a woman's infected leg with salve and herbs your mother once used. In another, you settle a land dispute not with law, but with laughter, reminding both parties that they shared a grandmother. This is how you rebuild a kingdom, after it's been burned, not with decrees, but with presence. Still, danger festers in the background. Portuguese colonial officers grow more frustrated. Reports describe you as elusive, mythic, impossible to corner. One officer even claims you've gone mad, living in the jungle like a witch. You send him a letter. It reads simply, I live in the jungle because you cannot. You hear nothing more from him. Your tactics evolve again. You begin using sound as strategy. Drumming patterns that shift with urgency, animal calls that signal troop movements, hollowed gourds that whistle in specific pitches. A whole language growing through the trees. You even commission silent footwear, sandals made from woven vine and softened leather that leave no trace in the dirt. Your soldiers can walk past a sleeping camp without disturbing a single twig. And still you teach. Every night, around every fire, there is a lesson. Sometimes it's tactical, how to flank, how to fake a retreat. Sometimes it's spiritual, how to seek protection, how to honor the dead. And sometimes it's personal. Never let fear sit on your shoulder, you say. It sees too much. One child asks, where does your fear go? You answer, I feed it to the forest. They believe you. You keep training replacements too. Not because you plan to fall, but because you refuse to leave a vacuum. You raise new generals. You teach them how to hold the line and when to break it. You create rituals of succession so that your death, if it ever comes, will not become a battlefield. You even revisit old enemies. You send a quiet message to a distant cousin who once supported Mbandi. He now rules a small border town loyal to Portugal, but tired. He expects vengeance. You offer forgiveness, and more importantly, grain. He accepts both. It's a move that stuns your court. But you know the truth. Empires are built not on hatred, but on leverage. Meanwhile, the Imbangala grow more integrated. You allow some to marry into local families. You give them land. You even let them send a delegate to your court. It's controversial. But you stand firm. Because even chaos deserves a voice, especially when it can be guided. Then, one afternoon, you receive a gift. A golden crucifix wrapped in silk, accompanied by a letter from a Portuguese governor. Let there be peace between our kingdoms. Your advisors urge caution. Your guards suspect poison. But you know better. This isn't a trap. It's a signal. They're tired, and they're finally willing to admit it. But you don't reply right away. Instead, you gather your council, and for the first time in years, you say something unexpected. We plan not for war. You pause, but for peace. Not surrender. Not weakness. Just the recognition that you have won enough battles to begin choosing your next ones. Because no queen fights forever. Not even you. Peace, it turns out, is another kind of battle. It's quieter, slower, filled with false smiles and sticky promises. But it's no less dangerous than war. In fact, it may be worse because in peace people forget to watch their backs. You do not forget. The Portuguese envoy arrives dressed in white linen and sweet perfume, his beard combed, his papers lined with gold trim. He bows deeply and calls you, Your Majesty. He offers wine gifts, even music. But you don't drink, don't unwrap, don't dance. You offer him a seat and then spend the first 10 minutes watching him sweat in the heat while you pretend to read a letter. Then you speak. Why now? He fumbles, of course. He says something about stability, trade, mutual prosperity. He even invokes God as if the heavens have personally nudged him to your doorstep. You nod along, polite, patient, but inside you're measuring everything. His tone, his hesitation, the exact amount of tremble in his hand when he picks up the goblet. Because peace isn't given, it's extracted, and you want to make sure you squeeze every drop of value out of it. Historians call this one of your most brilliant political pivots. You negotiated with Portugal not from a place of weakness but superiority. They needed trade routes. You had them. They wanted stability. You were already stable. They wanted to stop losing soldiers. You'd stopped counting theirs months ago. So you draft the terms. First, recognition of your rule over both Ndongo and Matamba. Second, Portuguese troops must remain in Luanda not one step inland without your express permission. Third, all captives taken during the last raids are to be returned. Fourth, you'll allow missionaries, but only the ones you approve, and they will live under your protection, not theirs. The envoy blinks. He coughs. He tries to suggest revisions. You smile and say, "Ah." Then, we are not ready for peace. After all, that shuts him up. You don't want all-out submission. You want leverage, an agreement that keeps them close, visible, predictable. If they accept, you'll let them stay. If not, well, you fought off worse with less. The deal is eventually signed, sealed in wax, blessed by a priest sent to Lisbon with praise and awkward footnotes. Queen Njinga, they write, is a woman of intelligence and formidable will. One diplomat even calls you the most effective ruler on the African continent. You receive the copy and use it as a coaster under your wine gourd for 3 weeks. Because what matters isn't the ink. It's what comes after. You begin shifting your efforts. Less fighting, more building. You expand roads between Matamba and Ndongo. You commission new markets. You create an inland trade network that bypasses Portuguese ports altogether. One of your proudest achievements. A series of rest stations, small compounds, every 3 days' journey, where travelers can eat, sleep, and pray. You call them fire nests. Each one is marked with your symbol, a spiral with a crown in the center. Fringe accounts say you visited each one at night, walking alone with your staff, whispering blessings at the door. You don't confirm this, but you don't deny it either. You also begin reforming the court. You re-establish traditional titles, blending Mbundu law with your own war-tempered leadership. Positions once handed by bloodline now require merit. You elevate scribes. You reward translators. You create a class of warrior diplomats, people trained to negotiate and defend themselves. You even offer your enemies roles, those who defect, who prove loyal. Because you understand something crucial. A grudge may taste sweet, but reconciliation builds empires. You start writing more. Letters, edicts, speeches, always in 3 languages, Kimbundu Portuguese and Latin. You don't want your people or your enemies to misunderstand a single syllable. Mainstream historians often quote one letter you wrote to a Jesuit priest. A kingdom must be built on more than blood. Let it also be built on breath, on memory, and on will. Meanwhile, your spies continue working. Peace may have settled the battlefield, but the real game is now politics. You learn who within the Portuguese ranks supports you and who secretly schemes. You learn which families in Luanda are in debt, which traitors overpromise, which priests are dangerously honest. One day, a report lands on your desk. An upstart nobleman in Luanda, related to a former governor, is planning to challenge your peace terms. He's gaining followers. You send him a letter. No threats, just an invitation to court. He declines. You send another, this time with a small sculpture, a lioness carved from bone, jaws, open paws resting gently on a musket. He flees to Brazil the next week. You never hear from him again. Your people thrive. Food is plentiful. Markets grow. Children play openly again in towns that once lived under fire. But you don't relax. You still wear armor under your robes some days. Not because you expect an attack, but because habit like war is hard to kill. You begin preparing for something else. Something every ruler must face eventually. Succession. You call in your niece, the daughter of your late brother. She's not a child anymore. She's sharp, calm, and curious. You teach her languages, politics, the art of listening to someone lie with a straight face. She learns quickly. One day, she asks, will they ever stop trying to take what we've built? You place your hand on her shoulder and say no. That's why you build it to outlast you. And with that, your greatest campaign begins, not one of war or treaties, but of legacy. Matamba breathes around you now, steady and alive. The roads are clear. The markets are loud. The crops rise in neat rows under watchful suns. You walk through the fields, and the people bow, not from fear, but from habit. The good kind. The kind built on trust. But something else is changing too. You feel it in your knees when you climb the palace steps, in your chest when you ride through the hills, in the long moments between council meetings when you find yourself staring into the fire, not planning, just remembering. You're aging. Not rapidly, not tragically, but undeniably. The nights stretch longer. The days, though full, are heavier. And still the kingdom needs you. But now you begin to need something back. So you start writing not just letters, not just laws. You write stories. Your own. The ones only you know. The ones about how it felt to sit on a servant's back and face a Portuguese governor. About the warmth of exile fires, the quiet weight of decisions no one else could make. You keep them in a sealed chest. Some in Portuguese. Some in Kimbundu. Some in both, tangled like twin roots of the same stubborn tree. Historians never find these writings. Maybe they never will. But you write them anyway, because some truths are meant for whispers, not textbooks. Meanwhile, you expand the palace compound, not in luxury, but in function. You build a new chamber for your niece. You create a war library stocked with maps, battle logs, coded correspondences. You install a council chamber built in a circle so no one sits above another. Your niece watches closely. She listens. She learns. One day, she attends court in your place, issuing a ruling on a dispute between two southern chiefs. You watch from behind a curtain unannounced. She speaks clearly. She doesn't rush. When one chief interrupts, she silences him with nothing but a raised eyebrow. You smile. She is ready. But your people are not. To them, you are the queen. The only one many of them have ever known. You are the fire in the night, the whisper behind victories, the reason the children now walk to school instead of running from muskets. So you begin gently. You take fewer trips. You delegate more often. You let your niece speak at feasts, represent you in small treaties, walk beside you instead of behind. Some grumble. They say she lacks your spirit, that her voice is too soft, her step too smooth. You say, then listen harder. They quiet down, because even now your words still carry the weight of 10 spears. Back in Luanda, the Portuguese are confused. They see fewer war reports, fewer raids. They send emissaries who return with tales of calm, of reform, of a queen who now reads more than she rides. One even suggests that you have softened. You laugh for 10 full seconds, and then send him a book of your military tactics, wrapped in black cloth. With no letter. You never hear from him again. But you do begin something new. You call it the Whisper Archive. A room deep in the palace filled with stories from your people gathered by your scribes. Victories, famines, songs, prayers, births, final words, all recorded, preserved, honored. You believe in war, but you believe in memory more. One wall of the archive is left blank. When asked why you say for the names we haven't heard yet, that becomes another proverb. Meanwhile, the priests at court begin to grow older too. You outlive most of them. Only one Father Oliveira remains from your earliest days of conversion. He is frail now, but still bold enough to question you over tea. You speak to God, he says. But do you still believe in him? You sip calmly. I believe in us. And if he is just, he will too. He nods and never asks again. Fringe tales claim the last missionary to challenge your religious views was found muttering in the chapel, convinced he'd seen your spirit walk through the walls. Likely, he just underestimated how quietly you move. You still wear armor some days, under robes, at council, even to prayer. Because peace like a blade can go dull if you forget it must be kept sharp. You begin training not just your niece, but her future advisors. A circle of young women, chosen not for blood but for brilliance. A cartographer, a healer, a judge, a smith's daughter who can dismantle a musket with her eyes closed. You call them the echo, because when your voice fades, theirs will carry forward. And still life stirs. You attend a birth one morning in a small village, a girl pink and loud named Njinga in your honor. The mother weeps when she sees you, not because she expected you to come, but because you did. You bless the child. You whisper something into her ear, something only queens understand. And then as you rise to leave, the villagers notice you're walking a little slower now, but still upright, still strong, still watching the horizon. Because even as you prepare to step back, you are still shaping the path. Rain taps gently against the palace roof. You sit by the open window, a clay bowl of warm porridge in your hands, watching droplets thread down leaves like beads on silk. The air is cool, soft. The kind of morning that tries to lull even warriors into rest. But you are not resting. Not truly. You're listening to distant chatter in the courtyard, to bird songs that change when strangers approach, to the quiet footsteps of your niece pacing the council hall. She is nervous. There's a meeting today, her first one without you present. You don't interfere. This is part of the plan. You've built her up over years, not just with lessons and legacy, but with exposure, hard talks, tense treaties, whispered threats disguised as gifts. She knows the game. She's ready to play it. Still, part of you wants to walk in just to watch. Instead, you turn back to the rain. Because this is the new fight now, not one of blades and borders, but of letting go. And letting go takes more strength than holding on. Your generals still check in daily. They offer updates, bring intelligence reports, request your blessing on every maneuver. You listen. You nod. You rarely speak. Then one morning, you stop signing the orders. You hand the quill to your niece. She hesitates, looks at you. Are you sure you don't answer? You just fold your hands. And she signs. That night you sit beside the fire and recall the first time you held a quill like that. Younger than her, angry, sharp, willing to burn everything to prove yourself. She is different, calmer, but not softer. You realize you've raised her not in your image, but in your echo. Not to imitate you, but to continue you in her own shape. Meanwhile, new diplomatic letters arrive from Portugal. They address her now, Her Highness, the Princess of Matamba. You chuckle. The Portuguese still pretend they invented the idea of royal succession, but you've had it prepared for decades. You wrote transition into your bones. Still, you keep your eyes open. One letter written in an elegant but unfamiliar hand catches your attention. It's from a younger governor, recently appointed, eager, ambitious. He compliments your court's dignified progress and suggests a future commercial pact of mutual benefit. He's trying to be clever, but you're already ahead of him. You reply in your niece's name, but with your words. You remind him of the prior treaties, of the boundaries, of the consequences. And then you close with, we look forward to trade provided the terms are clean and the hands offering them unarmed. It becomes a favorite quote among your scribes. You spend more time now in the garden, not the royal one. The old one. The plot of land you first cultivated after taking Matamba. There in the dirt among yams and beans is where you go to remember, to dig, to plant, to feel something grow under your hands. You find peace in it, but not idleness. You instruct the gardeners. You adjust rows. You still carry a small blade tucked into your belt, just in case. You've never been fully at peace. You doubt you ever will. But you have found something close continuity. That more than anything is what victory looks like. You begin mentoring beyond the palace. Young chiefs, midwives, fishermen's sons, anyone who shows promise. You gather them in the evenings, no titles, no robes, just lessons, questions, memories. They sit in silence as you speak. You tell them not just about battles, but about why they were fought. You say land matters, but so does language, and faith, and remembering your grandmother's songs. They take notes. You correct them when they use the wrong word for treaty in Kimbundu. Not because it offends you, but because precision keeps kingdoms from falling. Your teachings take root. One day, a boy from a northern village stands during a meeting and calmly corrects a regional chief on trade protocol. Everyone gasps. You just nod. You've always believed in children who speak too soon. They grow into leaders who speak just right. And yet the nights grow longer. You find yourself waking in the dark more often. Not from nightmares, but from memories. The weight of a throne, the taste of exile, the cold of an empty war camp. Sometimes you walk the halls barefoot, touching the stone walls, remembering how many times you've rebuilt them. Fringe tales claim that your shadow doesn't fall where others do that. It bends toward the past. Maybe that's true. Maybe you've earned the right to haunt your own palace just a little. Your niece begins leading foreign visitors herself now. You watch from a distance as she greets them with the same quiet strength you once used. One day, you hear her say, "I learned from my aunt. She taught me how to walk between peace and fire." You feel your chest tighten. Not with pride, with completion. Still, there's one final task. You call for a gathering. All your generals, all your scribes, all your priests, and your niece. You sit before them in full regalia armor under your robes, a simple staff in your hand. You do not speak for a long time. Then tomorrow I stop ruling. Not retire. Not die. Not vanish. Just stop. You stand. You nod. And then you walk out into the night. No one follows. Not yet. They all just sit there, because a storm that has raged for 50 years cannot end in silence. It must echo. And you have taught them how. The dawn is slow today. It rolls in like mist, not light. The kind of morning where the air feels heavy with memory. Inside the palace, everything is still. No clatter of council chairs. No hurried footfalls on stone. Even the guards at the gate stand a little straighter, as if aware they're keeping watch over the moment the world tilts. Because today, for the first time in more than 5 decades, Njinga does not rule. You are still queen, but only in name, only in echo. Your niece takes the seat in the council chamber. She's calm, regal, wrapped in indigo cloth with copper threadwork that you commissioned years ago for this very day. The circle of advisors speaks more softly than usual. They defer without being told to. They listen more closely than they did to you, because with her, they're still learning where the edges are. You watch from the hallway, not hidden, just unannounced. She doesn't need you there, which is how you know you've done it right. That afternoon, you walk through the capital. No guards, no entourage, just you, an old woman in a weather-worn robe, the hem dusty, the staff worn smooth by time. People stop and stare, not in shock, but in reverence. Some bow, some just nod. One small child offers you a mango. You take it with a grin, and for a moment it's as if all the years collapse into that one gesture, the sweetness, the peace, the offering of something whole and unbroken. You sit on a bench near the market. Once this street was filled with blood, Portuguese boots, screams, smoke. Now it smells of cassava and frying fish. Children chase chickens across cobbles. Merchants haggle over spice. The past feels like a shadow, but one that's finally been walked through. A woman sits beside you. She doesn't know who you are. She says the new queen has your fire. You say no. She has her own. She nods. That's enough. You return to the palace at dusk. Your private quarters are simple now. You gave away the silk, the gold. You kept only what mattered: your mother's carved stool, the first spear you ever held, a faded map marked with battles won and roads built. And a mirror. Not a large one. Just enough to see the lines on your face, the silver in your hair, the eyes that have never once flinched from power. You stare at it now and say aloud, you did not die a wife, or a mother, or a prisoner. You lived as a storm, and then you let yourself rest. Just a little. But peace, of course, never lasts without maintenance. 3 days into your retirement, your niece comes to you with her first real challenge. A provincial chief refuses to pay tribute. Claims he's loyal only to you, not to her. You don't speak. You walk to your garden. You dig your hands into the soil. Deep, Then you look at her and say, "Don't remind him who I was. Show him who you are." She gets it. The next week the chief swears full loyalty to her. Publicly, no tribute dispute ever happens again. You begin drafting your final archive. Not a will, not a memoir, a declaration. Not for the Portuguese, not for the council, for the people. You write, "I ruled as a woman who became a man, and then a god, and then a ghost. I do not apologize for any of it. You cannot keep freedom in one hand forever, but you can teach the next hand how to hold it. You seal it, give it to your archivist. Tell him to read it after your breath stops, not before." Meanwhile, foreign dignitaries begin arriving to meet your successor. Some request an audience with you. You grant none. The time for your voice has passed. And besides, they already know who taught her to smile like that when threatened. You hear your name less now in the halls. Not from erasure, but evolution. People say the queen and they don't mean you. And that you think is exactly how it should be. One night you return to the chapel. You haven't been in months. You light one candle. Kneel. You don't ask for mercy. You don't confess. You just whisper, "I kept the promise. I outlived them all." Then you stand. And outside, a breeze rustles through the palm trees. No birds call. Just silence. Not empty. Just full. Because there is nothing left undone. And finally, you are no longer a queen. You are a memory, a myth, and a future that now belongs to someone else. Time, as it turns out, is not the enemy. It simply continues, without drama, without ceremony. The sun still rises, the river still moves. The people still trade stories in the market square, though more of them begin with back in Queen Njinga's time. You become a past tense. At first it feels strange, like being present at your own funeral, watching yourself be folded gently into legend. But soon it begins to feel like a kind of freedom. For the first time in your life, you are not leading anything, not directing a war, not negotiating a treaty, not deciding who lives or who rules. You are simply being. And that is no small thing. You walk more slowly now, not from weakness, but from deliberation. You stop to smell the crushed mint leaves laid out at the herb stalls. You ask children to sing you songs you've never heard before. You feed the palace goats by hand. They recognize you now more than some of the new courtiers do. Your niece rules well. Not just competently, but wisely. She's inherited your command of language, your ability to make silence sound like thunder. And she's added her own touch diplomacy without deception, confidence without spectacle. Her counsel is tight, her trade deals fair. Her spies, well, not quite as good as yours. But that can't be helped. You still sit in on council occasionally as an honored guest. You say little. But when you raise an eyebrow, ministers pause. When you nod, they exhale. And when you don't respond, they go back and rethink their entire plan. You've become a kind of living proverb. Children are taught to ask, "What would Njinga do?" Sometimes they even wear feathers in your honor. Not red anymore. That's your niece's color. But silver. For wisdom. For endurance. One child says you're the reason their grandmother got her land back. Another tells you their brother joined the Queen's Guard because of a story you told by the river once. You remember none of it. But they do. You keep a quiet circle of old friends. Adia is still at your side, the warrior who guarded you for half your reign. Her hair is pure white now. Her spear retired. But her eyes are still sharp, and she still sits with her back to the door just in case. You two share meals. You don't need to talk much. Sometimes she brings you news before the scribes do. Other times she just brings roasted nuts and silence. And then there's Oliveira, the priest, older than sin now. His sermons are shorter, his hands shake, and his Latin is half Kimbundu these days. But his faith is firm, and so is his love for your people. He visits you weekly, not to preach but to argue. You pretend not to enjoy it, but you do. He tells you you're too proud. You tell him God shouldn't be so quiet if he wants more credit. He laughs, and then prays for your soul, just in case. Meanwhile, you begin preparing for what comes after you, not just in terms of people, but stories. You gather scribes, young ones wide-eyed and hungry. You tell them to collect everything. The victories, yes, but also the failures, the wrong turns, the the wounds that never fully healed. You want it all written down not just for glory, but for truth. You tell one, "If you write me only as a legend, I will haunt your pen." They believe you. They write you complicated, flawed, fierce, funny. You make sure of it because you want future queens to know power isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. You also visit the river again, alone this time. The same bend where you once camped in exile before Matamba was yours, before any peace treaties, before any crowns. You sit on a rock and watch the water pass. It's the same river, but not the same you. And as you dip your fingers into it, you whisper one name, Mbandi. You don't know why. Maybe because in the end he was part of your fire. Maybe because you forgave him long ago. Maybe because even the wrong ones deserve to be remembered. Back in the palace, your niece greets a new delegation from Brazil. They ask to meet you. She tells them she no longer meets with kings, which is true, because you've met. Enough. But later you do ask her how it went. She smiles. They flattered. I nodded. We'll trade. But not with discounts. You're so proud you almost choke on your tea. That night you walk the garden alone. The moon is full. You trace your fingers over a tree trunk where your first speech as queen was carved just a few rough lines worn by time and wind. You whisper to it, "You've lasted." And for once, you don't mean yourself. You mean everything. The rains return. Not the sharp, violent kind that accompany war drums and the march of soldiers, but the slow, soaking kind. The ones that settle deep into the earth, the kind that remind you the land is still alive. You sit beneath the overhang just outside your old council chamber, wrapped in a heavy shawl letting your feet feel the cool stone. The palace hums around you now, but it's a new rhythm. Children dart past giggling in the halls. Young aides speak too quickly, half in gossip, half in orders. Your niece's voice echoes down the corridor firm, but warm. The kingdom breathes. You exhale with it. But peace, as always, never truly means stillness. The Jesuits return, not the old ones weary and cautious, but younger men with fresh robes and eyes full of caution disguised as curiosity. They arrive with letters of introduction, cross pendants, and awkward kimbundu. They want meetings. They want access. They want to understand your kingdom again. You allow them a single audience, in the outer garden, standing, not seated. You don't dress in armor. You wear a plain indigo wrap, no crown, no guards. But you are holding a walking staff carved with the image of a lioness devouring a crucifix. They notice. You smile. The lead Jesuit stammers through his introduction. He praises your past conversion, mentions the honor of the church, and the need for clearer boundaries of spiritual authority. You cut him off gently. You're not here to save us, you say. You're here to keep from being forgotten. He doesn't reply. You let them stay, but only with the permission of local councils, only if they agree to live by the same laws as your own healers and spirit leaders. You do not ban them. You integrate them. Because integration keeps your hand on the wheel. It's what you've always done. Your niece handles the diplomacy afterward. She issues a royal decree allowing the practice of Christianity, but explicitly names Kimbundu rites and spirit honoring as equally sacred. A Jesuit complains. She replies, "If your God is so powerful, he won't mind sharing the sky." You grin when she tells you. "She stole that from me," you say. "Yes," she replies, "and I plan to keep stealing." You bless her for it. Meanwhile, traders from the north arrive, not Portuguese this time, but Congolese and Mbaka, merchants eager to rebuild older ties. You meet with them privately over calabash wine and grilled cassava. They bring stories, songs, news of small wars in far places. One tells you that your name is still sung in villages you've never stepped foot in. Another says that in the Congo Basin, children are taught that Njinga does not die. She waits. You raise an eyebrow. Waits for what the merchant just smiles. You consider it a fair answer. Back in Matamba, your scholars begin a new project mapping the stars. One of them, a woman barely 20, approaches you with a theory that the brightest constellation visible over your kingdom looks like a lioness walking across spears. You name it, Njinga's Walk. It becomes official. She writes it into the archive. It's not vanity, it's orientation. People need to know where they are, where they're going, what they're walking under. And if your name helps them walk taller, so be it. Your health remains steady, though you've begun feeling the cold more in your bones. Your fingers ache some mornings. You walk slower. You speak less. But when you do speak, the room still stops. One evening, your niece hosts a feast for foreign guests. Young singers perform a praise song in your honor. You're mentioned not by name but by title, the queen who would not kneel. You hear it and freeze just for a breath. Because the line reaches back to that moment in Luanda when you sat on a man's back because they refused to give you a chair. That story still lives, and it walks beside you like a shadow that doesn't grow smaller with age. After the feast, your niece finds you on the balcony. She says you could be remembered as a goddess. You say gods die too. She replies, but not stories. You both stare at the horizon for a while. A hawk circles above. Neither of you speak, because you know that moment is already entering memory. Later that month, you return to the river again. Not as a queen, not even as a mentor, just as Njinga. You remove your sandals, step into the water. It's colder than you remember, but cleaner too. You let it run over your ankles. Then you whisper 3 names into the current: your father's, your brother's, and your mother's. You ask them nothing. You offer them nothing. You just remember. And that's enough. The dry season returns with a fierceness you haven't felt in years. The air is thick with dust, and the sun presses down on the land like a dare. People walk slower now in search of shade. The rivers shrink, and the fields drink from wells deeper than ever before. And yet your kingdom holds. Because you prepared them for this. Not with sermons, not with prayers, but with water systems, food stores, leadership that thinks beyond a single harvest. While other provinces wilt, Matamba and Ndongo endure. And you sit in your courtyard beneath a red-flowered tree hand, resting on a carved stool, observing everything. You don't speak often, but when you do, it's like striking a match in the dark. The flame may be small, but it's the only thing anyone looks at. You receive visitors still. Poets, midwives, apprentices hoping for your blessing. They arrive barefoot, bearing small gifts, gourds of honey, bundles of herbs, scraps of cloth embroidered with your face. One brings you a folded letter from her father in Luanda, a man you once beat in battle. Now, a merchant, a grandfather. His note is simple. My daughter knows peace because you did not. You tuck it into a clay jar with the others. Your walls are lined with those now little messages from lives you shaped but never knew. They arrive without fanfare, just folded and pressed with hope, like seeds meant to sprout in silence. Fringe tales say you read them aloud to the wind at night. You don't, but sometimes you think them aloud. That's close enough. One evening, a messenger arrives with an urgent report. A Portuguese trader tried to bribe a local official to undercut your niece's tariffs. Your niece responds swiftly, confiscates the goods, expels the man, issues a revised trade doctrine within 48 hours. You raise no objection. But later, you call her into your chamber. You ask, did you act out of duty or anger? She considers, then answers, both. You nod. Good, you say. But always remember, anger ends fast. The consequences don't. She doesn't reply. She just places her hand over yours, and for a moment, you feel the old fire, the one that never burns out, just changes shape. And you know she understands. Not just ruling, but the cost of ruling. It's a rare understanding. In your quiet hours, you begin organizing your belongings. Not for departure. Not yet. But for clarity. You instruct your scribes to catalog everything: your armor, your letters, your maps, your personal staff. You even dictate notes about your favorite robe, indigo gold trim worn thin at the cuffs from years of sword practice. You want the future to know you were real. You also commission a stone tablet. It's not a tomb. It's a reminder. You inscribe it with these words: I did not wait to be chosen. I chose myself. You place it beneath a tree near the garden where you first planned your campaign to retake Ndongo. It's not grand, but it will last. And that's enough. One morning you wake with pain in your chest. Not sharp, just present. A heaviness that feels like memory made physical. Your healer is called. She checks your pulse, your breath. She says nothing alarming, but she lingers. Later that day, you ask your niece to bring the council together. You don't sit on your old throne. You let her lead. You only speak at the end. And what you say is simple. You are my last command. Carry it forward. Some of them weep, some just bow. And then you leave the room slowly without fanfare. The world does not end that day. You have another, and another, and another. But you begin counting them now quietly. You wake before the sun. You watch the sky shift from black to blue like it's the first time. You run your fingers across the carved patterns on your doorframe. You ask fewer questions. You give shorter answers. You let yourself become smaller. No weaker, just quieter. At night, you dream often of your mother. She doesn't speak in these dreams. She just walks beside you through tall grass, humming a song you forgot you knew. You wake up humming it. One afternoon, you call for Adia. She sits beside you, the two of you facing the fading sun. You say, if I leave first, you speak my name. Adia says, I'll shout it. You say, no. Whisper it. She nods. And you close your eyes just for a moment, letting that promise settle like dust on the skin. Because you've done what few ever could. You didn't just fight. You lasted. The drums are slower these days. Not funeral drums. Not yet. But a rhythm that knows the night is coming and plays anyway. A rhythm that says, we're still here. A rhythm that echoes off palace walls that were once cracked by war, now covered in woven reed mats and flowering vines. You lie in your chamber, the air thick with the scent of lavender and river mint. A breeze moves through the open shutters, stirring the curtains in lazy loops. You listen to the hush of distant conversation, the quiet clinking of bowls being washed, the gentle murmur of life continuing around you. You are awake, but your body has begun pulling inward like a tree preparing for the dry season. Your legs ache in the mornings. Your breath shortens when you stand. The stairs now look like hills. Your staff never leaves your hand, but your mind still sharp, still humming. And your people know it. They still bring disputes to your door, not for rulings, but for perspective. One day, it's a widow whose land was wrongly seized. The next two brothers arguing over who should inherit a herd of goats. You give no orders. You just ask questions. Did your father feed you both? Did the goats ever tell you who they preferred and somehow they leave with the answers they need? Your niece visits every evening now. She doesn't ask how you feel. She knows better. She brings updates, questions, jokes. Sometimes, she just brings silence sitting beside you as the oil lamp flickers and the moonlight creeps across the floor. One night, she asks, did you ever think we'd make it this far? You smile. I didn't think we'd survive. I decided we would. She leans her head on your shoulder. For a moment, you feel 20 again. Barefoot, covered in blood and ash. Standing beneath a Portuguese banner you just tore down with your teeth. You laugh out loud. She jumps. What is it? She asks. I just remembered how many times they tried to kill me, you say, and how many times they failed. She laughs too. It becomes a kind of evening ritual. And then, one morning, something changes. You wake before the birds. You sit up slowly, careful not to wake Adia, who now sleeps just outside your door. You dress yourself, no robes, no jewels, just a cotton wrap and a leather belt, the one you wore in the river camp back before Matamba, back before peace. You step outside. The garden glows with early light. A single white flower has bloomed out of season, stubborn, unexpected. You kneel beside it and whisper, I see you. That afternoon, you call for your scribe. You dictate your final message, not to your niece, not to your council, to the people. You say, do not ask the world to let you lead. Lead anyway. Do not wait for crowns. Take them. But when you do, wear them lightly like feathers, not chains. The scribe's hand shakes as he finishes. You say, seal it, save it, speak it when I've stopped speaking. He bows and leaves in silence. You rest that night. Your breath is slow, but deep. The wind carries a coolness not felt in weeks. You feel it on your skin. You smile. Somewhere outside, children are playing a game. You invented a chase game based on your court strategies where one child plays the queen and everyone else has to guess where she's hiding. You chuckle. They never guess right. They never will. You close your eyes, not because you're done, but because you've taught others how to begin. And the kingdom, it doesn't end with you. It rises from you. like a shout turned to song, like a throne carved from stone and memory, like a river that keeps moving even when the queen who walked beside it finally sits down. You are still, not gone, not yet, but still. The garden outside your chamber blooms louder than usual, bougainvillea curling into the sky, like flame fruit trees heavy with early ripeness. Birds sing soft and distant, as if trying not to disturb what they instinctively know is happening. Inside the room glows with afternoon light filtered through palm weave shutters. The air smells of sandalwood and memory. A breeze moves through, stirring the edge of your robe. Your niece sits by your bed silent. She holds your hand. So does Adia. So do 3 young women from the Echo, your final generation of students. They don't cry. They simply hold space, like you taught them. One of them whispers a prayer, not in Latin, in Kimbundu. You taught them both, but told them which one the ancestors understand better. Your breath comes slower, now spaced out like the pauses in a well-told story. Because you are the story. And stories don't end. They fade, then bloom again. A healer murmurs something about letting go. But you already did days ago. You let go of power when you passed your staff to your niece. You let go of duty when your people could rule themselves. And you let go of fear long before that may be the day you sat on a man's back to face an empire. Or maybe the first time you heard your name whispered by those who still had chains on their wrists. Now, all that remains is release, and it comes gently. Your chest rises once, twice, then stills. Your eyes stay closed. Your grip softens. Outside, the garden rustles with wind. A bird lands on your window. And then silence, not absence, just completion. They dress you in your armor. Not the full set, just the breastplate and leather cuffs. The ones that smell like smoke and wild mint. They comb your hair. They place a spiral-marked stone in your hand. They don't bury you in royal regalia. They bury you in readiness. And the people come. From every corner of Matamba and Ndongo. From distant villages, from riverbanks, from cities you never saw but that bore your name on banners. They sing. They dance. They remember. And in Luanda, the Portuguese lower their flags, not out of obligation, out of awe. Because in the end, even they could not deny what you became. Not just a queen, not just a warrior, but a force. A woman who made a kingdom out of nothing, who made language bend, who made peace with fire still in her eyes. And now the world carries you forward not on scrolls, but in footsteps, in women who lead, in children who speak boldly, in soldiers who defend with wisdom first, in every echo that dares say, I am not waiting to be chosen, because you already showed them how. Because Njinga does not die. She becomes wind. And now, as you lie back still and warm beneath your blanket, the flicker of the candle growing softer in your room, I want you to imagine her Queen Njinga at peace. No armor, no throne. Just a woman beneath a jacaranda tree, barefoot, eyes half closed. A smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. The sounds of her kingdom surround her, children's laughter, the soft swish of a river, the hum of bees in the long grass. She breathes, and the world breathes with her. There are no more battles to fight, no more messages to send. The legacy is complete, etched not in stone or silver, but in survival. In the fact that her people still speak her name, not with mourning, but with pride. And as the breeze rolls in rustling leaves and carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth, it's easy to believe she's still there, walking the forest path, sitting at the edge of the water, smiling from behind the curtain of time. So close, so calm. And maybe, just maybe, if you listen closely tonight, you'll hear the echo of her voice in the hush of the wind, saying, you are enough. You are strong. You can last. Now close your eyes, let your muscles sink deeper into the mattress and drift into that warm, steady dark. The kind that comes after the last fire has been stoked, when all that's left is rest. You've made it. You're safe. Let sleep take you now. Let history rest.